I will send you the link after the completion of the class. So we will start the class with the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamarupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guruna Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजन सहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान् सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So let us begin this class with a short recap of what we had done in the previous class. So this is the overview chart of this chapter number 8, where briefly a broad categorization of various verses has been placed. This chapter has a total of 28 verses. So from verse number 1 to verse number 4, Lord Krishna has answered Arjuna's question, which he asks in verse number 1 and 2. So in verse number 3 and 4, Krishna answers those questions by Arjuna. These are generally very technical questions that Arjun asks, and in rest of the Gita or in any other part of the Gita, these kind of technical words have not been used by Krishna. So we just uh, understand that these questions are mainly for maybe reference purposes, but not go into detail. However, the last question that Arjun asks is mainly about the process of dying. Say Arjun asks how to remember you at time of death, which Krishna responds in detail in rest of this 8th chapter. So we will continue with the same theme, how to remember Krishna at the time of death. From verse number 5 to verse number 8, uh, Krishna has given some broad guidelines or broad understanding how to achieve him at the time of death and how to remember him at the time of death. So from verse number 5 to verse number 8, that is what has been discussed. Verse number 9 to 13, Krishna mentions to Arjuna about uh, another process, which is how to remember him by the Yoga Mishra Bhakti process. So we will do a little recap of all small these individual sections very quickly. So this is the list of questions which Arjun asks, and as I have mentioned, the last question is how to know you at the point of death. That is the main subject of the rest of the chapter. So we will cover that in more detail. Then fifth verse is about how to remember Krishna at time of death. So Krishna mentions that you can once you remember me at time of death, you achieve me. So that is the main formula Lord Krishna gives to Arjuna in verse number 5. In verse number 6, Krishna gives a general understanding of a general law for the destination after death. Say what destination one gets after death. And here he mentions that whatever kind of consciousness a person develops throughout the life, or that will be the consciousness of that person at the time of death. And at death, the person achieves the similar destination. And you can see on the picture of the at the right hand side that if you develop lusty desire, you kind of get an animal body where you can satisfy your lust. If you do a lot of charity, you get a better body in terms of higher planets, in the higher planets where you can enjoy long life and a lot of facilities. Then Krishna mentions that Arjuna, that it is not only that you remember me and achieve me. He mentions that at the same time, while you are remembering me, you should also continue to do your duty. So this is one of the important verses in Gita, which specifies that simply remembering doesn't work. It is, we have to do our duties also together by remembering Krishna, and that is how we will achieve Krishna. So here, what the main message is that life is preparation and death is an examination. So we cannot say that just when it is about, when we are just about to die, we remember Krishna and achieve him. No, it is not possible. In order to have remembrance of Krishna at the time of death, we have to practice it throughout our life. And that is what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, that you continue to do your duty, but at the same time, offer your mind and intelligence to me through the activities dedicated to me. And that is how you will achieve me. But the question now is how we can remember Krishna at the time of death, or how I can practice Krishna consciousness throughout our life. And that is where Lord Krishna says that it can be possible through Abhyas Yoga. Abhyas Yoga means through practice, through sadhana. So, like we have been doing this one round of Hare Krishna Mahamantra at the beginning of our class, that is what I mentioned, that it is one of the important sadhana for a bhakta. So, and I would request everyone who are into this process, or who have surrendered to this process, or planning to surrender this process, to start at least one round of chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra on a daily basis. So because it is mainly to increase our remembrance of Krishna at least once in a day. And gradually, as you get the taste of bhakti, as you feel more convinced, as you feel, get that more experience of bhakti, you can continue to increase that sadhana as per your capacity and liking. Then going to the next section, now Krishna explains or start to contrast two processes of remembering Krishna. So one process is through Yoga Mishra Bhakti, which is not pure bhakti, but there are inclusion of other processes also in this bhakti process. So Krishna explains that process from verse number 9 to 13. Briefly, he starts to mention that how you can remember, or how a Ashtang yogi who is a Yoga Mishra Bhakta, how an Ashtang yogi can remember me at the time of death. So he gives few attributes, few characteristics of his personality. For example, he says that he's an Kavim, which means omniscient. He's Ano Aniyam Sam. He's smaller than the smallest. He's Achintya Rupam. He has inconceivable form. He's Aditya Varnam. He's luminous like sun. So through that, you can remember me by remembering my attributes. So here we need to understand that for a Ashtang yogi, he actually meditates upon form of the Lord. So he actually uses the Lord, or uses Lord's form as an object of meditation, rather than using Lord as the objective of his meditation. When we say object of meditation, I mean uh, he considers meditation on the form of the Lord as the tool to achieve his own goal. His goal may not be Krishna, his goal may be merging into an impersonal Brahmajyoti, or going to Vaikuntha planets and like that. So that is what I mean when I say object of meditation. Objective of meditation would mean that my objective is Krishna himself only, no, nothing else. Neither Brahman nor going to Vaikuntha planets. It is simply lotus feet of Lord Krishna. That is my objective. And how does he do that? There are some practices mentioned here, which briefly I would summarize that mainly the yogi raises the consciousness, raises the soul to the point where it is in between the two eyebrows, which is known as Agya Chakra. Through the pranamayu and through the strength of his yoga, he raises his soul to the place where it between the two eyebrows. And by remembering the Lord, using the qualities that we just discussed, and chanting the syllable Om, and fixing the mind on the remembrance of the Lord, these Ashtang yogis leave the body. And that is where this picture was shown to you, that vibrating sacred syllable Om, thinking of the Lord, the Ashtang Yogi goes to spiritual planets. These could be Brahmajyoti, these could be Vaikuntha planets, and so on. Now, in the last class, I wanted to discuss few things about few details or technical details about science of the self, science of reincarnation, and science of liberation. When I mean science, I just wanted to show you some pictures which will help you develop some concept about the gross body, the subtle body, and the soul. So in the picture that you see on the screen, we see there are three entities. One is in brown color, one is in green color, and one is in yellow color. So the one that is in brown color is the gross body. Gross body means earth, water, fire, air, ether. So these are 5 elements that we studied in chapter 7. These constitute of gross body. And when I say subtle body is made up of mind, intelligence, and false ego. Man, buddhi, ahankar, which is shown here as green. And the blue circle that you see here, solid circle, that is the soul. That is situated in the region of the heart. So that is the Vedic understanding of how we are organized as human beings or as living entities. So we have a gross body, we have a subtle body, and we have a soul. Now, what happens at the time of the death, or when the soul takes another body, what happens is shown in this picture. So you can see here in this picture, when the person dies, the soul together with the subtle body. So you see there is a green color picture shown here, and the soul is in the center. So this is soul carried by the subtle body. Subtle body is mind, intelligence, false ego. So in the mind, what is stored there? The desires are stored, and the karmic impressions are stored. So you get the next body according to the karmic impressions, that is your karmic score in this present life, and according to the desires that you have developed till the time of death. So you have that consciousness you have developed throughout your life, through your actions, through your dealings, by living in this world. And based on those two aspects, the soul and the subtle body gets the fresh body, which is shown on the right hand side. But the subtle body, the important point here is the subtle body continues to go together with the soul. It is only the gross body that is left behind. And what happens at the time of liberation? Because we are talking in this chapter about how to attain Krishna, how to attain liberation, how to get Brahman liberation, how to get Paramatma liberation, those kind of topics we are discussing. So what happens at liberation is the subtle body and the gross body together is left behind, and the soul only leaves both these bodies together and goes to these spiritual planets where he takes another spiritual body which is more spiritual in nature rather than gross in nature. So these are on the left hand side, you see brown and green, these are gross and subtle bodies, and on the right hand side that you see a spiritual body. So we will continue with our discussion on chapter 8. So far we discussed how to remember Krishna at time of death, and then Krishna starts to explain two processes. One is how to remember him through Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and the second topic now he will be contrasting is how to remember him through pure Bhakti, Shuddha Bhakti, Kevala Bhakti. So now Krishna is talking about how to remember him through pure Bhakti. So here the verse is, I will be chanting the verse with you, for you. The verse goes like this. Ananye chetaha satatam yo mam smarati nityashah tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yoginah. So the verse says there are several important words here, and you can see there is one word called satatam. Satatam means always. Then there is our word used nityashaha and nitya. Nityashaha means regularly, nitya again means regularly. So Krishna has used Nityashaha and Nitya actually 2 times in this verse. So you can see how stressful, how much stress actually Krishna is laying down on regularity of remembering Krishna. So as we just explained in the beginning of the class, the chanting of the holy names of the Lord is one of the important limbs or important ways of remembering Krishna. So you can see some reflection of that thought being mentioned here in this particular verse. So Ananya Chetaha means without deviation. Ananya word comes from, it's a combination of two words, Anya or An. Anya. Anya means other, Anya means no other, which means without any other goal or desire in mind. Ananya Chetaha. Chetaha means consciousness. Without any other thing in your mind, single-mindedly, with one pointed focus, single pointed focus. Satatam, always. Yo mam smarati nityashah. Whoever remembers me, smarati means remember. Whoever remembers me nityashah, regularly. Tasyaham sulabha partha nitya yuktasya yogina. Sulabha means very easy. So here you can see the contrast is coming between the process of remembering Krishna by Yoga Mishra Bhakti versus remembering Krishna by pure Bhakti, Kevala Bhakti. So Krishna says that who remembers me always and regularly, he actually obtains me very easily. Sulabha. Tasyaham sulabha partha nitya yuktasya yogana. So that yogi, that practitioner, that sadhaka is easily obtained by me. On the right hand side, you can see in the picture, I have shown 9 processes of bhakti. So you can remember Krishna by these particular 9 processes of bhakti, and you can contrast them from the process that we just studied in our previous class. And I gave a brief overview or a recap of a Ashtang Yogi, how he remembers it. So the Ashtang Yogi remembers by meditating upon some of the attributes of the Lord, which I mentioned in verse number 9 of this topic of this chapter. And then by fixing his mind on that form of the Lord and raising his soul, raising his pranavayu and carrying the soul together to the point when it comes to the Agya Chakra, in the center between the two eyebrows, he chants the syllable Om and then leaves his body through the top, which is the Brahmarandra. He breaks the skull. The soul actually departs and goes to the higher planets, Vaikuntha planets or Brahmajyoti planets. That's how is the process of Ashtang Yogi who leaves the body. Now you can contrast that particular process, which is Yoga Mishra Bhakti, to this process, which is Navadha Bhakti or the processes of Bhakti. And the pictures are being shown how you can do that. So picture you can see on the screen where I'm rotating my mouse cursor. By Shravana. Shravana means by hearing the Lord. Then second one is by Kirtan. Kirtan means by chanting the holy names of the Lord or by speaking about the Lord. So if you are telling somebody about the Lord is also called as Kirtan. When you are reading, you are doing Shravanam and Kirtanam both, because you are reading means you are reading the text from the book, that is Kirtan, and then in your subconscious mind you are hearing this inner voice that is actually Shravan. So reading is also Shravan and Kirtan. So similarly, you do smaran, you remember the Lord, you meditate upon some form of the Lord, you focus on some of the form of the Lord, some of the activities of the Lord, some of the pastimes of the Lord. That is called smarana. Then pad sevan, only serving the lotus feet of the Lord. That is also a limb of bhakti. You can dedicatedly serve the lotus feet of the Lord. You can decorate them. You can offer tulsi leaves at the lotus feet of the Lord. You can offer some flower at the lotus feet of the Lord. So all these simple processes fall in the category of bhakti. Then you can see archan. Archan means worshipping. So for example, you might be doing arati at your home. So that is called archana, offering archana. That is archan. Then vandana means bowing down before the Lord. Sometimes you go to the temple and then you do some dandavat pranams, or you do sashtang pranams, or you just fold your hands before the Lord, close your eyes, meditate. That is vandanam. Dasya means treating the Lord as a friend. So like Arjuna was in the mood of dasya. So in this, like you can behave with the Lord like a friend. So that is called dasya bhakti. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. That is dasya bhakti is not the example is not Arjuna. Example is Lord Hanuman. So Hanuman used to consider himself as the servant of the Lord, sevak. So he would fulfill all the orders of the Lord like a very sincere and obedient servant. So that is dasya bhakti. So you can, here you can see in the picture, you can clean the temple of the Lord like a menial servant, or you can serve the devotees of the Lord, offer them some prasad, some food in a very humble way. That is actually dasya, humility. Uh, and you see Sakhya, as I was mentioning, it is the example is Arjuna, where you deal with the Lord as a friend. So that is an example of Sakhya bhakti. And on the top you can see it is Atmanivedanam. Atmanivedanam means surrendering everything to the Lord, everything that you possess, surrendering to the service of the Lord. And the example of Atmanivedanam is Bali Maharaj, who, when Vaman Dev came to Bali Maharaj actually surrendered everything to the lotus feet of the Lord. So that is Atmanivedanam. So now you can contrast how accessible, easy, and comfortable these various Navadha Bhakti processes compared to when you have to do Ashtang Yoga, where you have to really do a lot of mechanically, a lot of hard work and uh, very, very intense sadhana to actually be able to raise your pranavayu together with the soul to the Agya Chakra and leave the body. And there are many other conditions that you will study in this chapter. So this is 8.14. Now we will move further. So after giving the idea to Arjuna that it is very easy to remember, it is very easy to attain me if you remember me regularly and always. Now Krishna mentions that by this process, there is no rebirth. So again, the same process is giving the advantage that for Kevala Bhaktas, there is no rebirth. So in Yoga Mishra Bhakti also you get liberation, you go to Vaikuntha planets or Brahmajyoti, achieve Brahmajyoti. But for pure devotees also there is no rebirth. And here, this is one of the very famous verse. Prabhupada used to quote this verse a lot in his classes. So this verse goes like this. Mamupetya punarjanma dukkhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gatah. Mam upetya punarjanma. Mam upetya means achieving. So once you achieve me, mam upetya punarjanma, you don't take rebirth. Punarjanma. Huh? Mam upetya punarjanma, from where? Rebirth from where? Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. So he's referring here, Lord Krishna is referring here, this material world where we are living at the moment. He's referring here as Dukkhalayam and Ashashvatam. He's saying that this place, this material world, is actually a place of misery, and it is Ashashvat. Ashashvat means whatever item, whatever thing or anything that you see in this world is Ashashvat. Ashashvat means it is under the jurisdiction of time. It will deteriorate, whatever it may be. It has to work under this jurisdiction of time, which the property of time is to destroy. And that is why he says it is ashashvatam. Similarly, like we are living in this world, we have this body and one day we have to leave this body. That is why he's saying it is ashashvatam. And why he's saying house of miseries? Because there are 4 such miseries in this world for which there is no solution available at the moment. And these miseries are actually no one can avoid, but nobody wants. These are common to everyone. Nobody wants these miseries and nobody can avoid these miseries. And what are these 4 miseries? These are Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi means birth, old age, disease, and death. Now, old age, disease, and death, you can understand that these are miseries. How birth is a misery? The Vedic literature actually describes that birth is a misery because when a embryo or a living entity starts to develop within the womb, it is a very, very uncomfortable situation and position for the embryo inside the womb. So once the embryo, once the baby comes out from the womb, then he forgets about that misery. So since old age, disease and death, we can understand their miseries. And if scriptures are explaining birth to be a misery, we can relate to it. It is, and also it is always, we call it as labor pain. We don't never call it as labor pleasure, isn't it? When a lady is delivering, it is always known as a labor pain. So that is how we can briefly understand how birth can also be a misery. Now, when I was explaining to you why these are miseries, I was explaining you that these are common problems. These are, nobody wants them and nobody can avoid them. There is no solution for death. There is no solution for disease. You can maybe cure for a short time, but you cannot say that I cannot get diseased in my lifetime. Similarly, you cannot avoid old age. It has to come. It will come. And birth, as I was explaining to you, that if you die, you have to take another body, and then there will be another birth. So this is called cycle of birth and death. In contrast to these miseries, which are I would say the real miseries or the Vedas described as the real miseries of human society or living entities, there is another kind of misery which is temporary. So just to give you a little brief hint of what would these miseries be. So these miseries would be, for example, if you have a toothache and you want to solve this toothache problem by going to the dentist. So for you, it is a misery. The toothache that we got is a misery for you. But for dentist, it's a business, it's a pleasure. So some problems that are there in the world are relative. Relative means it is misery for us and maybe a pleasure for somebody else. Maybe rainfall can be misery for someone, but a person who is selling umbrellas is a pleasure for him. It's a business for him. He would really pray to Krishna that, okay, kindly send us rains so that my umbrellas can sell. But for somebody who works in the outside for some construction related work, it may be a misery. So the idea is some miseries are relative. It may be misery for someone, but pleasure for somebody else. Similarly, these kind of problems may have a beginning or an end. They come and they go. Like toothache, you go to the dentist, you solve it. Or a stock market, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. So it has a beginning and has an end. And also, these problems have intermittent periods of happinesses and distress. So we have put an acronym here called RBI to easily remember that what are called temporary problems or temporary miseries versus what are permanent problems. So permanent problems, the acronym is CNN. Common, nobody wants them and nobody can avoid them. So this is mainly the main crux from this verse. So Prabhupada has always used this verse to explain this phenomena of dukkhalayam ashashvatam. We'll go to the next one. And you can see on the picture in this particular slide that I have shown, you can see there's a devotee being shown here coming from material planets and entering into the spiritual realm where Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani are waiting for his welcome. So this is mainly to emphasize the point that there is no rebirth for pure devotees. Once they remember Krishna through the process of Bhakti Yoga and their 9 processes, they are at death, they actually enter into the spiritual realm together with Lord Krishna. Now, we will move forward. In this verse, this is also another important verse. And probably for some, it might be a little bit of a revelation when I will explain this verse to you. So after explaining that the pure devotee attains the spiritual world and giving some hint about the material world where he says it is a dukkhalayam and ashashvatam. It is temporary and it is full of miseries. Lord Krishna is now contrasts what is a spiritual world and what is a material world. He presents some contrast or some differences he outlines in this particular verse, which is the 16th verse. Here he says, आ ब्रह्मा भुवनालोकः पुनरावर्तिनो अर्जुन मामुपेत्य तु कौन्तेय पुनर्जन्म न विद्यते. आ Brahma Bhuvanal Lokaha. He's saying right together from the lowest material planets to the topmost planet, which is called Brahma Loka. Punarjanma, Punar Avrattino Arjuna. Punar Avratti. Avratti means repetition. That is called Avratti in Hindi or in Sanskrit. Avratti means repeat. A Brahma Bhuvana Loka. Right from the lowermost planet to the topmost planet of Lord Brahma, there is birth and death, birth and death. So that means that Lord Brahma is also subject to birth and death. And I will explain that life of Brahma little bit in the next verse. But you can see in the picture that is there on your right, where I have shown Lord Vishnu lying on the Garbhodak ocean. Lord Vishnu is this form of Lord Vishnu is known as Garbhodakshai Vishnu. So when Lord Krishna decides to create, he expands himself into Mahavishnu, also known as Karanodakshai Vishnu, and Karanodakshai Vishnu further expands himself into Garbhodakshai Vishnu. There are various universes that are coming out from Mahavishnu, and Garbhodakshai Vishnu enters into each of these universes and fill this one of those individual universes with his sweat, uh, and creates an ocean, Garbhodak ocean. In that ocean, Lord Garbhodakshai Vishnu lies there on Sheshanag, where Mother Lakshmi Devi, Goddess Lakshmi Devi, actually serves the Lord by pressing or massaging his feet. And from this Vishnu, there comes out a lotus stem, and this lotus goes high up, and on this lotus, Lord Brahma takes birth. So this is what is shown on the right hand side, and along the stem of the lotus, there are 14 planetary systems. So there are 14 planetary systems. The name maybe we can discuss in some other class, but there are 7 planetary systems which are considered as better or upper planetary systems, superior planetary systems, and there are 7 planetary systems which are considered as inferior, or you can call them as hellish planetary system. So depending upon the karma of the jiva actually can move to the upper planetary systems or the lower planetary systems. Now, what we are mentioning here is a contrast between spiritual and material worlds. So what Lord Krishna here is explaining here is that in all of these material worlds, right from the lowermost hellish planetary system to the topmost planetary system, which is acquired by Brahma, Lord Brahma, and the name of that planet is called Satyalok. In all of these planetary systems, there is birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. But in the second line of the verse, Lord Krishna says, Mahamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. But if you achieve me, if you come to me, then there is no janma, there is no birth for such a devotee. So the link to the next verse is mentioned in the bottom of this slide, where in the first line of the verse it is mentioned as there will be rebirth, and it will be elaborated a little bit in the verse number 17 and 19 what it means. It will give you some glimpse of the life of Brahma, the age of Brahma, and so on. And from in the second line of this verse, it is mentioned about the Lord's abode, that Mam Upetya tu Kaunteya. So in verse number 20 to 22, 8.20 to 8.22, there is a brief, quite some description about Lord's abode. What is the spiritual abode where the Lord lives? So we will go to these verses. Now, the section which we wanted to discuss about remembering the Lord by pure bhakti, kevala bhakti, ends with verse number 8.16. From verse number 8.17 to 8.22, Lord Krishna gives a further detailed elaboration of material world versus spiritual world. From 17 and 9 till 19th verse, he will give you some idea about the material world, and from verse number 20 to 22, he will give an idea about the spiritual world. Let us see. Yeah. So before we go to verse number 17, let us have a little conception about what is called as Vedic time. Now we all, as human beings, we know what is 1 year. 1 year comprises of 12 months. Each year consists of something like 365 days, 360, 365 days. So these durations, for example, if we have to explain the duration of these various ages, various yugas, uh, most of you would have heard about Kali Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Satya Yuga. So, what are the duration of these various ages? So, Kali Yuga is of 4,32,000 years. So, we are at the moment presently in Kali Yuga, of which only 5,000 years have passed. However, this age is going to continue till 4,32,000 years. Years means human years, like we know 365 days of human existence. So if I say one Kali Yuga duration is as K, so Dwapar Yuga is 2 times Kali Yuga. Treta Yuga is 3 times of that of Kali Yuga, and Satya Yuga is 4 times that of Kali Yuga. So all these yuga together, which you can call as Chatur Yuga or Divya Yuga or Maha Yuga, or you can call it as a one yuga cycle. This one yuga cycle is of total of 10 times the duration of one Kali Yuga. So 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, this gives you 10 times the age of Kali Yuga. So what it means, it is 43 lakhs 20,000 years total, one yuga cycle. And then if I have to explain you the duration of one day of Brahmaji's life, one day, only one day of Brahmaji's life, I'm not talking about night, it's only one day. So one day of Lord Brahma is equivalent to 14 manvantras. So I will explain manvantara a little later. And one manvantara is actually 71 mahayugas. Mahayugas is these. So 71 Mahayugas means 71 times 10K. So this is something like 710 times the duration of Kali Yuga. And if you now calculate Brahma's day, so it is 14 times 71, which is roughly like 994 Mahayugas, almost 1000 yugas. So that is the age of Brahmaji. And now this chart actually gives you a more graphical description of what it means. So on this chart, if you see the line that you see on top of this slide, it's actually representative of life of Lord Brahma, which is something like 311.04 trillion human years. And one day of Brahma is known as a kalpa. That is known as a kalpa. 36,000 kalpas is the days of Brahma in his life. So like if you imagine that 1 year of Brahma is 360 days and the age of Brahma is 100 years. So how many days will be there? 360, 36,000 kalpas. So you see here, it is shown here, this is one day of Brahma, which is one kalpa. One day of Brahma has been shown and has been divided into 14 manvantras. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So these are 14 manvantras. And what are these manvantras? Manvantras are those period of time where we are ruled. The universe is ruled by a king by the name Manu. In general, they are known as Manus. So Manu is actually the first human being as per the Vedic literature. So Lord Brahma, first of all, created Manu. The first Manu his name was Swayambhuva Manu. And through Swayambhuva Manu, the creation was populated. So you can see, I mean, this is the first Manu's region. In this reign, like you see the first Manvantara, here first Manu actually ruled the universe. Then the second Manu came, third Manu came, fourth Manu came, fifth Manu came, like that. One day of Brahma is equal to where 14 Manus actually rule the universes, different Manus. At the moment, we are in the seventh Manvantara, and the name of our Manu is Vaivasvat Manu, which is also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita 4th chapter. So you can see here that this is one kalpa, this is one manvantara, which is equivalent to 71 yugas, Chatur yugas. And this is one yuga, and this one yuga is, this is Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So that is a little more graphical representation of life of Brahma. I hope most of you would have been able to capture what I'm trying to say. Okay. Now, why I was explaining to you is all these two slides in just now that we discussed. It is mainly if you read from Bhagavad Gita 17th verse. So 17th verse, Lord Brahma says, Sahasra Yuga Paryanta Maharyada Brahmano Viduhu. Now here the first word in this verse is Sahasra Yuga Paryanta. Sahasra Yuga. Yuga, as we just explained, this is Chatur Yuga, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So 43 lakhs 33 43 lakhs 20,000 human years. That is one Yuga cycle. And here Lord Brahma says Sahasra Yuga. Sahasra means 1,000. So that is what I was explaining to you, where Brahmaji's life span is given in this verse. Sahasra Yuga Paryanta. Paryanta means duration. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Maharyad Brahmano Viduhu Ratrim Yuga Sahasratam Teho Ratra Vido Janaha. Now, the translation of this verse is, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together from the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. So what we just discussed is the length of Brahma's one day, and equivalent is the length of Brahma's one night. So you can imagine how lengthy is the life duration of Lord Brahma. So that is what you get as you go to higher and higher planets. You get much more life duration and much more facility to enjoy the material things that you get in those planets. So I have tried to explain here is Brahma's one day and night is described in this verse. Also, it is mentioned in Prabhupada's purport that one day of Brahma is known as Kalpa. And another point is, since Brahma also has a life, it also has a life which has a birth and a death. So also Lord Brahma is not free from birth, disease, old age, and death, as you can see. Now we will discuss the next two verses, 18th and 19th, where Lord Krishna is explaining that at the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from the unmanifest state, and thereafter, when the night falls, they are merged into the unmanifest again. Now, the process of creation and destruction is described. So the living entities come out, take manifest forms like human beings, animals, plants, trees, birds, reptiles, aquatics, and so on. So at the beginning of Brahma's day, all these living entities, they come out from the body of Mahavishnu, or Mahat Tattva is it is actually known as, and from the material from the matter from which all these creation is done by Lord Brahma, not from Mahavishnu's body. So from this matter, when these living entities come out, they take manifest form. They are visible now. But as the day concludes and the night starts, they again become unmanifest. Unmanifest means they go back to the once again to the unmanifest state, and they become invisible. So this is what is mentioned in verse number 19, where the Lord is saying again and again, at the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from the unmanifest state, and thereafter, when the night falls, they are merged back into the unmanifest again. And in verse 19, he further explains this, that this happens again and again. It is not that, so Vedic times, the concept of Vedic time is cyclic. It is not linear. Linear means that it starts from some point and ends at some point, and then it doesn't happen again. No, it's not like that. It's cycle. And you can see, you can correlate that how it is cyclic. Our seasons are cyclic, isn't it? We have summers, then we have rainy season, then we have winters, then we have autumn or maybe a spring season, and then once again we have back to summer. So this is cyclic. So the concept of Vedic time is cyclic. So this is the also the concept explained in verse number 19, where he says that again and again, when Brahma's days arrive, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. So the main theme of this verse is that this happens again and again, and the living entities are helplessly annihilated. Annihilated means they become unmanifest once again. It is not to say that the soul is destructed, but they unmanifest. They don't have bodies. Now they go back into an unmanifest state. So that is mentioned in verse number 18th and 19th. Now, this is a little bit about the material worlds. Now, in order to contrast material world, Krishna gives a very beautiful glimpse of what spiritual world looks like. This is a little bit more, beautiful. You will probably appreciate that. So, in the verse number 20, Krishna starts to introduce the spiritual world for the first time in a little more detail in Bhagavad Gita. He says, "Parastasmattu bhavonyo avyakto avyakta sanatana yah sa sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu na vinashyati." What is saying? Yet there is another unmanifest nature. So this is also, Lord Krishna is saying, this is also unmanifest. Unmanifest means invisible. You don't see it. Avyakta, another invisible nature, which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. So in the previous verse, we saw that how the matter and the living entities become manifest and they become unmanifest. So he's saying there is another unmanifest nature of mind which is eternal, and it is transcendental. It is different. It is actually beyond the manifested and unmanifested matter which we just discussed. It is supreme and it is never annihilated. What he's saying here is, what Lord is saying here is, it is supreme. It is param. Parastasmattu bhavanyo avyakto avyaktat sanatana. It is supreme and it is never annihilated. It is permanent. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. So that is what Lord Krishna is explaining to us, that when everything is annihilated, when everything in this material world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. Now, to show you the bigger picture of what everything exists here in this whole creation is shown in this picture, which I forgot to describe to you in the previous slide. So in this picture, you can see a lotus is there, and in between Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani are seen with some cows and some other cowherd boys and gopis. So, and in corner you can see in gray color, there is Mahavishnu doing creation. Universes are coming out from his pore of his body, and a navel and there is a one universe shown where it is Garbhodakshai Vishnu. From his navel Lord Brahma is coming out, and Mother Lakshmi is pressing his feet. So you can see that. So that gray portion that you see on the right hand bottom corner actually is the material creation, and the rest of it is spiritual creation. So where now contrasting between material and spiritual world, you can see that among the whole creation, roughly 3/4 is a spiritual creation, which is not annihilated, which remains all the time. Every time it is there. And on the right hand bottom corner, you see material creation, in which we are living in one of the planets, which is known as Earth, and in one of the maybe small cities or villages. That is what our significance is there in the whole cosmos, in the whole creation that is there. So that is mainly to contrast between the material versus the spiritual. So spiritual creation, Lord says that it is invisible, it is avyakta, it is unmanifest. You cannot see. But if you develop that quality, if you develop those spiritual quality, if you become qualified in this world by doing sadhana, proper sadhana, then you become qualified to go and enter into that realm which is known as spiritual world, or which Lord Krishna is mentioning here is avyakta. And in the second line of this verse, of verse number 20, he says, Yahasa sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu na vinashyati. Then when everything in this world is annihilated, that part remain as it is. So that's what it is. And what is that? And that is called as a spiritual world, eternal spiritual world. So in the previous slide, you saw something spiritual world from a far distance. Now, what happens in the spiritual world from a close distance? The picture is shown on your right hand side. A painting is shown on your right hand side, where you can see that Lord Krishna is returning after grazing cows in the fields of Gokul Vrindavan, Golok Vrindavan, coming playing with their friends. And there are houses where the devotees of the Lord are actually waiting for the Lord to return, so that they can have a small glimpse of the Lord while he's returning back to the to his abode, to his home. And that is what is eternal spiritual world. So maybe there are some 2 BHK 3 BHK apartments, or maybe studio apartments in the spiritual world. Maybe we can aspire to, or actually develop that desire to once reside, at least have some fancy desire like that. So it is mainly to create that kind of a taste, or maybe desire into the heart of the devotees by showing this picture. My wife is saying that we can also live under a tree in the spiritual world. That also will be nice to go there. Anyway, so in the verse number 21, Lord Krishna further explains. He says, "Avyakto kshara iti yuktas tam ahu paramam gatim yam prapya na nivartante tadhama paramam mama." So he is explaining that this is a supreme destination, paramam gatim. And this destination is actually unmanifest, as we discussed in the previous verse also, and it is infallible. Infallible means it doesn't destroy, it is not destroyed. So in this verse, once again, Lord Krishna is saying that yam prapya na nivartante. Nivartante means returns back. One who achieved there, one who goes there, he doesn't go back, he doesn't come back. Tad dhama paramam mama. That is my paramam abode, that is my supreme abode, that is my house. So who no other person is better than explaining about his own house. And here the Lord himself is giving you a very vivid description about the supreme destination, his spiritual abode, in verse number 21. So here Lord Krishna is concluding this particular section of the of chapter 8, where he says how you can what is the process to achieve that abode. Here he says, Purushah sah parah partha bhaktya labhyasva ananyaya yasyantah sthani bhutani yena sarvam idam tatam. The Lord is saying that his abode is attainable by Ananya Bhakti. What is Ananya Bhakti? Here is saying, Purushah Saha Parah Partha Bhaktya Labhyasva Ananyaya. Ananya, as I was explaining before, Anya means other, Ananya means no other. So Bhaktya Labhyasva Ananyaya means only by unalloyed devotion, only by pure devotion one can achieve me. So the translation of this verse goes like this: the supreme personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Unalloyed means without any impurity, purely desiring and aspiring to achieve the lotus feet of the Lord. Although he is present in his abode, he is all pervading and everything is situated within him. So somebody can question that, okay, the Lord is living in his abode, so how he is manifesting here in this material world as Paramatma or as Brahma Jyoti? How is he manifesting in this material world? So that is what uh, it is understood from this particular verse, where the Lord is saying that yasyantah sthani bhutani yena sarvam idam mama, where he's saying, although that he is all pervading, yasyantah sthani bhutani, which means everything is situated within him, and then yena sarvam idam tatam, sarvam idam tatam. So he's all pervading. So those are the two attributes of the Lord. So besides being the fact that he is situated in his spiritual abode, he is everywhere. And everything is situated within him. So nothing is separate from him. So the Lord is concluding now this particular section of chapter number 8. Now he's concluding this chapter 8, starting from verse number 23 to verse number 28, where the Lord is explaining the supremacy of pure bhakti in attaining Krishna. Now, so far, he has explained what is the Yoga Mishra Bhakti, what is pure Bhakti, how you can attain Krishna by pure Bhakti. And then he has contrasted between the material world and the spiritual world. He is now concluding the chapter by speaking about the supremacy of pure Bhakti in attaining Krishna. In this chapter, there are, in this particular section, there are 6 verses. And we will not go into a lot of detail of these verses, but I will explain you very briefly, because Krishna also has explained them very briefly. Uh, in verse number 23, he says, "O best of Bharatas," that is Arjuna, "I shall now explain you the different times at which passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back." So he's now giving, once again, contrasting between the two processes, the bhakti process as well as the Ashtanga Yoga process. And he's explaining, he's now giving a little further detail that how these Ashtanga yogis at the time of death, uh, when they leave, when they leave their body, so by what process they should leave the body, they should attain me. And if they leave a body in a certain other way, they actually don't attain me. And these are two different times of the day where these are classified in verse number 24 and verse number 26, where Lord Krishna is saying that one is a path of light and one is a path of darkness. In verse number 24, Lord Krishna is saying, "Agnir Jyotir aha shuklah shanmasa uttarayanam tatra prayata gachanti brahma brahma vido janah." Now, these are a little bit technical in nature, these verses. So would like to draw your full attention to this, because you might get distracted and may not be able to understand quickly. Now here Lord Krishna in this verse number 24 has given some names: Agni, Jyoti, Aha, Shuklaha, Shanmasha, Uttarayanam. Tatra Prayata Gachanti Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha. So he's saying that those yogis who are Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha. Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha means who have progressed to the level that they are Brahman realized. They are actually progressed. They have purified themselves to the level that they are Brahman realized. Such devotees or such sadhakas, if they leave their body in this time where it is day, it is waxing phase of the moon fortnight, and it is Uttarayan. The sun is actually in the northern hemisphere. In this time of the day, if the person leaves the body who is Brahma Brahma Vido Janaha, who is a Brahman realized soul, then he doesn't come back. So this is what I'm trying to mention in this table as path of light. So what are the two qualifications? So the devotee or the sadhaka should be Brahman realized, and he should time his departure well. How a Brahman realized soul can time his departure well? Because of the power of yoga. So you might have heard about that story about Lord Bhishma, Bhishma Pitamaha, where he was lying down on the bed of arrows, but he had that ability to leave his body at whatever time he wanted. He had the Vardhan for Iksha Mrityu. So it is something like that. So those sadhakas, those Ashtang yogis, who by the process of yoga or by the power of yoga, they progress to the level that they can at will leave their body. So the time recommended for them for leaving the body is uh, is mentioned is that by in the influence of light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, and during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. So if somebody times it like that, besides being Brahman realized and doing all the austerities of Ashtanga yogis, he achieves liberation. He goes to Brahma Jyoti, and then he doesn't come back. Then in the verse number 25, he's giving the path of darkness. Now, path of darkness he is describing as Dhumo Ratristatha Krishna Shanmasha Dakshinayanam Tatra Chandra Masam Jyotir Yogi Prapya Nivartate. What Lord is saying here is the mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon, planet, but again comes back. So this is the other process. So those people who are not able to follow this, or who for some reason are able to not complete their sadhana fully, completely well, and they leave during this time of the day when it is smoky, when it is night, and when it is the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, actually goes to the moon planet. Moon planet is something which is a planet where you have a very big lifespan, and there are a lot of facilities available for enjoyment. The lifespan is very long, and when you go there, you have to come back once again. You have to take birth once again. So it is something like, you can say, these people go to heaven, Swarga, and then they have to take birth once again. So this is the path of return. Okay. So after explaining a little bit about how the Ashtang yogis, or how the Gyanis who are aspiring for Brahman liberation achieve or at what time of the day and in what conditions they actually have to leave their body in previous verses, the Lord now establishes the supremacy of bhakti. In verse number 27, Lord says, although the devotees know these two paths, say that the bhaktas know both these paths, that if you leave the body in this time of the day, you don't return, and if you leave the body in this particular duration, then you actually have to return. Then the Lord is saying that devotees know actually all these paths, but they are not bewildered. Why they are not bewildered? Because they are always fixed in devotion, and these conditions don't apply to them. And in verse number 28, Lord Krishna finally concludes in this chapter where he says, and finally establishes the supremacy of pure bhakti by reciting this verse. Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tattva sarvamidam viditva yogi param sthanumupeti chadyam. It's a verse in a different meter. The meter used here is Trishtup Chanda. The previous verses in this chapter primarily have been in Anushtup Chanda. So you can see the singing of this verse, or the chanting of this verse, will be a little different. Most of the time when something important or some important juncture is coming in the discourse of Gita, you will see that the meter of these verses actually change, just to emphasize that the point that we are trying to read now is actually a little bit more important or relevant or deep. So here Lord is saying, Vedeshu yagyeshu tapahasu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam. Here what is saying, Vedeshu yagyeshu, do all kind of yagya, tapahasu chaiva, do all kind of austerities, daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam, do all kind of charities, giving donations, whatever. So whatever you are doing by, or whatever benefit or punya phal, where in the second line it is mentioned punya phalam pradishtam. So whatever these activities, whatever punya these activities are going to give you, you can achieve all that punya simply by doing devotional service to me. Here atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam. Here Lord Krishna is the translation of this verse goes like this: a person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, means bhakti, he attains all these, and at the end he reaches the supreme eternal abode. So here Lord Krishna says that by engaging in the bhakti process, one can surpass all the rituals. What are the rituals? Rituals of reading the Vedas, rituals of doing yagyas, doing tapasya, doing dan, doing all kind of punyas like this. But if you simply do bhakti to me, which I have explained the 9 processes in one of the previous slides, you surpass all of these rituals and you actually come back to me. So on the picture on your right, you see how Lord is actually trying to pick a devotee from the ocean of birth and death, the Sansar Sagar. where the devotee, after performing the bhakti, attracts the attention of the Lord, and Lord, at the time of death, out of his sweet mercy, and he bestows upon this devotee and picks him up from the ocean of birth and death. And after that, for this devotee, there is no coming back to this material world, which is dukkhalayam ashashvatam. So I hope that concludes this chapter, and it would have been a little bit of enlightenment for you on some of these verses. I would now like to open the class for discussions, comments, and any questions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for patiently giving me your attention in this class. Thanks a lot. There is complete silence.
Yeah, Prabhuji, Manish here.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, a little bit difficult chapter, I would say, the last few things. Yeah. So
right.
very nicely explained. And I think the misery about the birth, I think that was really true. And I think we should never aspire for rebirth. That is what I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, correct. That is correct. Actually, we should aspire for developing love for the Lord. That is what if you have to explain the process of bhakti yoga to someone in simple words, you can tell that person that this is yoga of love. Love for whom? Not for Aishwarya Rai or some Bollywood heroine. Love for the Supreme Lord.
So but if we die and if we go to the spiritual world, so what happens? Our subtle body as well as the soul both goes to the spiritual world?
No, the subtle body and the gross bodies are dissolved. They are left behind.
Dissolved. Okay.
So gross body, actually, whenever you die, whatever body you have, you leave it behind. Correct. Subtle body goes on till you take birth in these material world. Subtle body and the soul are together, because that subtle body is the element or the energy of the Lord, which records your karmic score and which records your desires. Your consciousness is stored in subtle body. So in the subtle body, the consciousness is there, the desires is there, karmic score is there, but in the soul is actually you. That is the actual personality that you hold. So at the time of liberation, the subtle body and the gross body is left behind, and the soul goes to the spiritual world and takes a spiritual body. So till that point, it is in a very seed form. It is very like a condensed form. But when it goes to the spiritual world, it actually expands and takes a spiritual body.
And there is no return from the spiritual body back, correct? So once you go there, you will stay there. No return.
No return.
Yeah. And the second question, I think, sorry.
Because in the material world, the jiva have had experienced a lot of miseries. Birth, old age, death, and disease. These are the miseries which nobody wants, nobody can avoid. And when he goes back to the spiritual world in the loving association of the Supreme Lord, he doesn't want to come back.
And he will continue staying there only.
Yes.
Okay.
Naturally.
And the another thing you mentioned about the Brahma, correct? He has several rebirth. I think you told me he dies, he against rebirth. So what is that actually? So
what it means is Brahma is a living entity who has a very long time lifespan. So the idea is that Brahma also takes birth and dies. Each of these universes that I show you remember I've showed some pictures where from the pores of Mahavishnu, there are multiple universes that are coming out.
Correct.
Isn't it? So in one of those universes, each of these universes has its own Brahma, has its own Vishnu, has its own Shiva. So each of these universes, so there are millions of Vishnus, millions of Brahma, millions of Shivas in each of these universes. So Brahma for that particular universe does the creation in that universe.
So that means last time you mentioned all these Brahma or maybe Shiva, these are all considered to be as a demigods, correct?
Yes, they are known as demigods. Yes.
So all these demigods are reborn always. Something like that is the concept, or
Reborn means, say, Lord Shiva's
rebirth?
position. Lord Shiva's position is a little different, and maybe we can discuss that sometimes later. But Lord
Okay.
Brahma is a individual, is a living entity like you and me, but has a lifespan of 311 trillion human years. That you can
Correct.
understand.
Yeah.
So how long it is? It is something like eternity for us,
Okay.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Good questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
More questions? Any other question?
Can we discuss verse number 26 again?
Verse number 26. Okay. Maybe any other question before that?
So question
Prabhu,
is
I
related
have,
to that only.
Okay. Maybe Sita Mataji is asking another question. Probably.
yes, Prabhu, you mentioned that there are 7 superior planets, but from my understanding is that for spiritual practice, you have to be born in this earth again to go to the higher planet. Is that correct?
That is correct. And you can say that the understanding is that when you in the higher spiritual planets, there is a lot of facility available for enjoyment. So,
but not for spiritual.
No, facility is available for spiritual also. The point is that the distractions are more there.
Right.
So when the living entities goes there, generally they forget about their spiritual advancement and they start to enjoy the facilities there. And when they are enjoying the facilities, all the punya that they have acquired, because of which they went to that planet, all the punya slowly kind of starts to diminish. And when it is completely diminished, they once again fall back to the earthly realm. And once again, it starts. So it is good if in the earthly realm itself you can kind of perfect yourself and directly go from here to the spiritual worlds.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you. Before I go to Amit's question, I would like to mention that the formula for learning chapter 8 is given in this particular slide, which I have made which we have made an acronym by DEAD. So D means doubt, which are the first 4 questions that are first 4 verses of the chapter, where 8 doubts were asked by Arjuna. Krishna responds. Then E is the end of life. End of life is something where Krishna explains about the process, how you can come to me. And then attaining God, where there are 2 different processes, Yoga Mishra Bhakti and Pure Bhakti are described to attain God. And in the last 5-6 verses, the devotion to the Lord has been glorified. So this is the small acronym that you can remember to finally learn or remember this chapter in a seed form, in a sutra or a formula form. Yeah. So now going back to verse question 20, question by Amit Agarwal. It's on verse number 26 of chapter 8. Yes, Prabhu. Any specific question? Amit ji?
In verse number 26, the timing of death is being mentioned, that these 6 months are auspicious. You have to die in these 6 months only to go to attain Krishna. Otherwise, you will be again going back to rebirth cycle.
Yeah. See, the idea is, first of all, you should understand that the basic qualification is Brahman realized. The time criteria starts later. If you read the verse, the second line of the verse in verse number 25, it says Brahma Brahma Vido. That those are the 2 words that are there. So first of all, you have to purify yourself to that level that you become Brahman realized. I will explain you the concept of Brahman realization maybe little later. But you can, for the time being, understand that it is one stage in the purification process. The second stage is called Paramatma realized. Then the third stage is called Bhagavan realized. So the idea here is, for Ashtanga yogis, Bhagavan realization doesn't come. Bhagavan realization only comes when he follows bhakti process, when he considers both Krishna's greatness as well as sweetness. Then he goes to Bhagavan realization. But till that point, if he has purified himself to the level of Brahman realized soul, winning all the tendencies of the senses, purifying himself, having no other low desires. In that situation, uh, it is one of the prerequisite. So even after that, the yogi has to time his death sufficiently well. So if you read the Tatparya that Srila Prabhupada has given for verse number 25, you will read what Prabhupada is mentioning here is, if one leaves the body at the time designated above, either accidentally or by arrangement, it is possible for him to attain the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. So Ashtang Yogi who is Brahman realized, if he leaves his body during first 6 months, during the daytime and during the first fortnight of the waxing moon, then he will go to the
So that is my question.
Yeah.
If that person
Hmm.
has the ability to time his death well,
Hmm.
then why won't he will time in these auspicious timings which are mentioned in the first 6 months?
because
And if he doesn't have that ability,
Hmm.
then all of his other uh, abilities in terms of his bhakti or whatever sakarma he has done,
Yeah.
will that all go waste because he's not has the ability to time his death?
no, it doesn't go waste. The only thing is, for our purposes, see, the whole idea here is, it is basically contrasting two particular processes. One is a process of Ashtang Yoga, and the
Mhm.
other process is Bhakti Yoga. So
Mhm.
the details, if you want to read, there is another Upanishad called Chandogya Upanishad, which
Mhm.
gives a lot of details about all these things. Actually, I mentioned many things very briefly. Actually, I skipped several of these things also. But for our purposes, not to go into a lot of technical issues about all these processes. See,
Mhm.
the idea is Lord Krishna is contrasting here Ashtang Yoga versus Bhakti Yoga.
Okay.
And what he's trying to say is, in Ashtang Yoga process, there are a lot of conditions. Not only you have to time your death well, you have to do all kind of Ashtang Yoga, raise your pranavayu to Agya Chakra and leave the body at a particular time of the day. So the devotees, and in 27 he says that devotees doesn't want to bewilder themselves by all this. They are simply under my guidance. Because they are under my control or under my protection, my shelter, uh, I take care of their departure. I take care of how they will transport from their existing bodies to my abode. That I will take care. You don't have to worry about it. But these Ashtang yogis, see, the basic difference between the mentality of an Ashtang yogi versus the Bhakti yogi is, Bhakti yogi surrenders. Bhakti yogi takes shelter, Sharanagati. He depends upon
Okay.
the Lord. He
Mhm.
doesn't even aspire for liberation. He be- because he doesn't even aspire for liberation doesn't mean that he doesn't get liberation.
Mhm.
He is selfless. He simply wants to love the Lord. Even if he has to come back to this material world, but the facility is given to him to love the Lord, to do all the services to the Lord, he is happy. But in the eyes of the Lord, such a devotee becomes very, very advanced, very, very beloved in the eyes of the Lord. And Lord says that once he leaves the body, actually for this particular person, there is no difference between the material world and the spiritual world. In the spiritual world also, the devotee will be serving the Lord. And if he is serving the Lord in the material world also, for him it is no difference. And you will learn in chapter number 9, where Lord now will start to describe the process of bhakti even in much more detail, where he will tell that this bhakti yoga process, the experience that you start to get, is it doesn't dependent upon that you are in the spiritual world or in the material world. So pratyaksh avagamam. Pratyaksh avagamam, that's the word that he used in 9th chapter. Pratyaksh avagamam means direct experience. So once you develop this consciousness of loving the Lord and reading these scriptures like Gita, Bhagavad, and all these things, chanting the holy names of the Lord, slowly you will develop this love. This is not a overnight process. This is going to take time. This is a gradual process. It's a journey. It may take one lifetime, may take couple of lifetimes. So it is not that you will be perfecting yourself in one lifetime, but the point is, once started, you will complete the journey. So the idea is, it is contrasting these two processes, where You either take Bhakti Yoga or you take Ashtanga Yoga. So in the process of Bhakti Yoga, there is the feeling of surrender, dependence on the Lord. But in the process of Ashtanga Yoga or in Jnana Yoga, there is a lot that the sadhaka actually says that I will do it. He relies a lot on his own capabilities and say faculties, his own internal faculties, that I will do it. The devotee thinks that I am just a simple servant of the Lord, just want to develop some service, some love for the Lord, and want to follow the instructions of the Lord, want to hear about the Lord, develop love for him. But the Ashtanga Yogi says that yes, I also have that kind of thing, but majority of his inclination or thinking is, how do I by my own efforts I can reach there. That is why you see in the Ashtanga Yoga it is said that he has to raise the pranavayu and take the soul to the Yagya Chakra, and then he leaves the body, and then he times it in a certain way, then he leaves the body. Yeah, so that is the primary difference.
So Ashtanga Yoga is tougher to practice.
Yeah, that is the exact point. That is the exact point Lord Krishna is trying to establish through all these discussions. It is very tough, not possible in this age, certainly at least for most of us.
And pure bhakti is at least the path is clear that we can start the journey, and it is supreme compared to Ashtanga Yoga. So
even Ashtanga yogis have to come to the platform of bhakti if they want to go to the Lord, go to Golok Vrindavan, the spiritual world, the final abode, the Paramam Dham. Before that, they at best they can get Brahma Jyoti or Vaikuntha planets. They don't enter to the supreme abode. Spiritual worlds also have a lot of gradations.
But Ashtanga Yoga path is smaller, and Bhakti Yoga path is longer, takes more time.
No, not like that. Ashtanga Yoga path is very, very complicated.
Okay.
You can start Ashtanga Yoga, for example, Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Dhyan, Pratyahar, Dharan, Dhyan, Samadhi. So you can do Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, maybe some Pratyahar, but it becomes complicated after Dharan, Dhyan, Samadhi. Very rarely people are able to achieve Samadhi. It's a very, very tedious path. Like you can feel right now.
Yeah. So for us as individuals, Bhakti Marga is a thing which we can start following and along with our daily routine life.
Correct. You can do it like Arjuna, Lord Krishna said, for Arjuna or people like who are working, who are housewives, working professionals. What does it take? Simply chant the names of the Lord, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes in the day. Do some puja for the Lord. Hear about the message of the Lord on a regular basis, like you are hearing Bhagavad Gita's discourses. So there are many other subject matter which you can discuss. So once you engage yourself in this process, the purification starts. The purification starts. The impact or the effect of modes of material nature, like the Maya, Gunamayi Maya, the three modes you saw in the previous chapter, that the effect or the impact of those modes on your consciousness will starts to subdue, and you will feel relief. So that's what the practice is this for Bhakti Yoga. It is easy, and anyone can do, even a small child can do. But for Ashtanga Yogi, it is Ashtanga Yogi you cannot do by working in a office. For Ashtanga Yogi, actually you have to renounce the world. Once you go for these stages called Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi, then you have to renounce the world. Before that, you have to purify yourself by doing either Karma Yoga, by doing Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahar. So it's a very tedious process. You can read Patanjali Yoga Sutra to understand more about Ashtanga Yoga.
So Prabhuji, that means the Ashtanga Yogi takes lot of efforts. He does lot of sacrifices. So he achieves some higher place than the Bhakti people.
No. Bhakti, as I was saying, that the Bhakti process is the topmost process. Even Ashtanga Yogi, by his own Ashtanga Yoga process can at best achieve Paramatma realization, where he can go all to Vaikuntha planets. So, for example, like you see in this picture, you see in this picture,
Yes, yes,
you see a big lotus in the center,
correct.
and there are small multiple planets surrounding it.
Mhm.
So these are Vaikuntha planets. So
Okay.
Ashtanga Yogi can at best achieve this. This is the best possible achievement for him. But for a devotee, he directly surpasses all this and go to Golok Vrindavan, to the abode of Lord.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
Prabhuji, you
Yes, Prabhu.
mentioned that these yugas repeat. So,
Yeah.
is there any difference in the events which happen in these yugas? For example, does Krishna incarnate in the next Dwapara, for instance? So, will that
Yeah,
repeat, or
that
is there a
repeats.
difference in the events?
Those events repeat. Those event repeats in various kalpas. Various incarnation of the Lord happen, and I mean the same incarnation repeats. So like in Treta, Lord Ram will come. In Dwapara, Lord Krishna will come. So those things also repeat. That's what that verse is in chapter 4. What was that verse? Let me find it out. Very famous verse in the Mahabharata seal. In the beginning, they play that verse. Yada yada hi dharmasya ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थान अधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम् परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे. Isn't it? I appear myself millennium after millennium. So it is not that one time he comes and the job is done. And all of these yugas, the consciousness level kind of towards the deterioration. In the Satya Yuga, the consciousness is the purest. In Treta, it is less pure. In Dwapar, it is even less pure. And the most degraded it is in Kali Yuga. And will continue to degrade further as the Kali Yuga process progresses.
Yeah, but do the events recur the same way it recurred earlier?
More or
For
less, yes.
instance,
Yeah,
for
there
instance,
might
the
be
material world.
some differences.
No.
Maybe some differences, but more or less they recur the same way. So sometimes you see that you will hear various different accounts of pastimes of Lord Ram, Lord Krishna. So one of the reasons that is given is that some pastimes, because these pastimes are revealed, these are revealed to the authors who write these books. For example, Goswami Tulsidas wrote Ramcharitmanas. So you see the pastime of Lakshman Rekha is there in Ramcharitmanas, but it is not there in in Valmiki Ramayana. So people generally, the acharyas generally explain that this is the differences between the Leela's, slight differences between different yugas. Okay, so nice questions. I really appreciate. I would like to welcome Mr. Anurag Vinayak, who is joining us, I think, for the first time. Dr. Ishwar Chaudhary from Rohtak, my respectful father's good friend. Dr. Chaudhary, a very warm welcome to you. Also, very thanks to Geeta ji, who had recommended several of our friends to join our Geeta classes. I see another person by the name Krishna Bharadwaj. Krishna Bharadwaj ji, also welcome to you. So, sorry, I don't know your परिचय. आपका परिचय मैं से अवगत नहीं हूँ. So maybe you can connect with me separately and introduce yourself. Mamta Mata ji, welcome, and Nand Kishore Prabhu. Piyush ji, welcome once again. Rekha Mata, Priya Mata ji, welcome. Shubha ji, welcome. My father, welcome. Anuradha ji, welcome. I think Umanath's iPhone is Anuradha Mata ji, if I'm guessing correctly. Vishkarma ji also already I had welcome. Himanshu Joshi, my wonderful senior colleague, dialing all the way from US. Please welcome to you, sir, as well. And I think most of the other people I have already interacted with.
Shri Kishan Bharadwaj is my class fellow.
Okay, welcome, Dr. Saab. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
He's a very nice man.
Yeah. Thank you. So, so please let me know any other comments, any other points that you would like to discuss. All questions are very good, but I think coming only for a couple of individuals only. Maybe the ladies were a bit silent. Matajis were silent. Any
No,
question?
can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just want to know that deja vu experience what we have is something related to this again and again. What when you say God comes again, the incarnate is again, the same yuga gets repeated in different. This one, the deja vu feeling, what we feel, small ones, is it the same thing? Have we experienced this somewhere, sometime in some lifespan?
Probably deja vu, I think, is something which, if I translate it correctly, is something which we feel that we are going through some experience in a current moment, and
Correct.
through that experience we feel that maybe we have experienced it in the past.
Correct.
So those could probably because of our previous life impressions or previous maybe within the same life or maybe within the previous life, but difficult to explain very scientifically whether these are related to the previous life or the present life. So that much I can maybe say, not more than that.
Because when you say the Lord is there in every yuga and every repetition, and there are many more universes, and this whole thing gets repeated again and again. So I just feel if that is being repeated, then we are also getting repeated somewhere at some point.
Yeah, we are repeating within not only in different yugas. We are actually getting repeated within the Kali Yuga multiple times. So our lifespan is something like maybe 70-80 years now, or not even 100 years. So after we take our or leave our body, depending upon our consciousness, most likely we are going to take another body, or for those fortunate souls who have perfected themselves, maybe they will go to the lotus feet of the Lord. So but as I said, the focus of the devotee, as I'm again and again repeating, should not be on liberation, mukti, going to Vaikuntha, going to Golok Vrindavan. It is mainly should be for loving service of the Lord, developing love for the Lord. So when you chant Krishna, then when you remember Krishna, when you remember Ram, when you hear about their pastimes, how the Lord was dealing with his devotees in his pastimes, as mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana, as mentioned in Gita, as mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, then there should be some emotional move within your heart. That is the indication that you are actually the bhakti is taking deep root within your heart. There has to be some emotion towards when you see the Lord. When you are traveling on the road, you see a temple on your right hand side, and spontaneously your hands are raised in the glorification of the Lord. That time you see that you are progressing in bhakti. That is the mood, that is the consciousness a devotee should aspire. That's what bhakti yoga actually means, and that is where the whole focus should be. The idea about there is a spiritual world, we should go there, that is all. Yes, we should understand them, we should know them, but the objective is mainly to develop love for the Lord, loving service for the Lord. Yeah.
I also want to know, like, we are fortunate, we come for the class, we understand, we read, but there are many unfortunate ones who don't know anything about either the Gita or the Lord, but they do pray to some Lord in the form of idol worship, but they don't know anything, they don't understand anything. In the sense, like, we are fortunate, but they are not.
Yeah.
So just by bhakti itself, they are able to get their own liberation.
See, whenever you do any spiritual activity, you get Agyat Sukriti. Agyat Sukriti means these are pious credits you acquire. So if you have, for example, accidentally served the Lord, not maybe knowingly, but accidentally you have served the Lord. Maybe you have offered the ghee lamp accidentally. You get Agyat Sukriti. So these Agyat Sukritis continue to pile up during your lifetime, maybe the next lifetime. And at one point of time, these Agyat Sukritis become so much that you are now attracted towards the devotional service of the Lord. See, when we approach people and request them to come to these programs, to hear Bhagavad Gita, to hear Ramayana and all these things, people do come to us, but sometimes they leave. Sometimes people come to us, they live with us, or they associate with us maybe for 3 years, but then they disappear for next 3 years. But again, after 3-4 years, they again come back. So
Okay.
it is mainly because the Agyat Sukritis are developing. And the Agyat Sukritis, when they develop to a certain point, they now are able to develop much more faith and much more interest towards the message of the Lord. And once with that small faith, small shraddha, then their devotional creeper, then their devotional bhakti lata beej actually starts to grow.
Okay. Okay.
That's how it works. So that's why many people who are there, you see, in the living in your material world, they are at different level of consciousness. To some, if you request them to take to bhakti process, they will simply not come because
Yeah, right.
they have not developed that kind of a appreciation so far for the message of the Lord. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good questions. Okay, I think it's 7:15. We are hitting the top limit of our time limit of our class. I'm so much thankful to all of you who have taken so much of your precious time to join and listen to this class. I hope it was beneficial to you. I'm once again with a lot of gratitude in my heart. I would like to greet you with the Hare Krishna. Please join us again same time next week. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Like explain.